Hello, music fans. You're watching Death by Unicorn, and this is What's New 2023, my show where I talk about new albums that came out in metal, rock, and prog over the past week. And this week I'm going to talk about 8 new albums that came out, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference. And this is going to be a little different because I'm starting off right off the bat with 2 metalcore albums. Usually my focus is more on prog, and my preference is more on prog, but this week had a couple great metalcore albums that I want to give a nod to. So the first one is Termina and their album Soul Elegy. And this is metalcore. It's got some deathcore vibes, some post-hardcore emo, some gent and progressive metal vibes, as well as some pop hooks and alternative rock influences. It's the second album by this band that features a well-known YouTuber and fellow Canadian Nick Nocturnal on guitar, and features Andy Cizek, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Cizek, who also sings in Monuments on vocals. So if you want to hear some of the best metalcore breakdowns of the year, this is an album you have to check out. It has some of the catchiest choruses as well, and the vocals from Andy are great as always. He has so much power in both his screaming and his clean singing. The riffs that Nick provides are also just great here. Next, I want to mention Code Orange and their album The Above. Both of these albums came out on September 29th, as do most of the albums I'm going to talk about today. This one is also metalcore. It's got a little bit more of that hardcore punk vibes to it, as well as some industrial and alternative rock influences as well. This is the 5th album by this American band, and this album just has lots of variety. It ranges from intense brutality, scream vocals, to soft songs with nice melodic singing. I think it's great that they have 4 band members providing some vocals on this album, and they even have a guest appearance from Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, who does a great guest vocal spot on one of the songs. So you hear a lot of variety in the vocal department. Reba Myers provides the female vocal sound, and then Jamie Morgan does a lot of the lead vocals, and Eric Belrose and Dominic Landelein also do some vocals in addition to the instruments that they play. And this album also features Max Portnoy, son of Mike Portnoy, on drums, and he does a great job here. If you're a fan of bands like Under Oath, Cancer Bats, they've got kind of the hardcore metalcore vibes of those, plus maybe some Rammstein for the industrial vibes, and the Smashing Pumpkins as well for that alternative rock vibe that they have in here. It sounds like a mixture of those bands, so if you like the sounds of that, check this out. Next, my third favorite album from the past week is Haunt the Woods with their album Ubiquity, and this is alternative rock with progressive folk and pop influences. It's the second album by this band from the UK. The vocals on here sound like Tom York from Radiohead, and I was just pleasantly surprised by how good this whole album is, so I plan to check out their other album. Not too much to say other than check it out if you like the sound, the idea of Radiohead-like band with some progressive, maybe Pink Floyd kind of influences, as well as some folk and pop, and just catchy and some cool time signature changes and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. This one's like on the border of me calling it prog because it's kind of more alternative rock, but it's got enough prog in it that maybe it qualifies. And next up is a big one that everyone's talking about, Steven Wilson and the Harmony Codex. All the prog YouTubers are going to be talking about this one. So this is progressive rock, but it's very electronic. It's the 7th solo album from this founder of Porcupine Tree, and he's made a lot of albums with Porcupine Tree. He's made a lot of albums with No Man, Blackfield, and his various other projects like Storm Corrosion. Great musician, Steven Wilson, great composer, great producer. Let's start with what I do like about this album. I like the production, the sound design, and the ambience on here is amazing. My favorite tracks are Impossible Tightrope, that's my favorite, and then Economies of Scale. And now on to some of the things I don't like. I really hate the drum sounds on here, or or maybe I should say the lack of drums. I imagine this is pretty much all programmed beats on a drum machine, and it really sounds like it. If you're a fan, though, of Radiohead's albums The King of Limbs and Kid A, I think you'll like this. It kind of reminds me of those. It's very electronic. To me, it even feels like his most electronic album he's ever done, even more so than The Future Bites, which was fairly electronic already. But The Future Bites leaned more towards these pop song structures, so it had a bigger focus on catchy vocal melodies and hooks and chord progressions and song structure. This one's a bit more free flowing in terms of song structure and is a little bit more about beat loops and ambience. It's a little bit more experimental and less poppy than the Future Bites. But I do wish there were more organic sounding rock band moments on this album. Staircase has a great guitar solo, but other than that song, there's not too much electric guitar on the album. There's a couple of acoustic guitar moments, but not many electric guitar leads or solos or anything interesting on that front. Not even that much acoustic guitar. The synthesizers are the main instrument here, and he gets some great sounds out of them. Really takes the listener on an interesting journey. All in all, I'd say if you only like his first 4 solo albums and didn't really like To the Bone and The Future Bites, I feel it's unlikely that you're going to like this album as much as his first 4 albums. And for me, that's kind of where I am. I like this album. I like To the Bone and The Future Bites and the Harmony Codex, but I don't love them, and I love his first 4 albums. Those are the ones I really love, and I think To the Bone, The Future Bites, and the Harmony Codex are good. They're fine, but they leave me a little disappointed because I know Steven is capable of making great albums like his first 4 solo albums and many of the Porcupine Tree albums he's made. Next up is Sacred Dawn and their album Dismal Swamp. This is progressive metal with heavy metal and power metal influences, and it's the 4th album by this American band. I heard the single Truth Be Told ahead of time. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I'd love it based on that single. But this is a smaller band. When I just checked today on Spotify, they only had 184 monthly listeners. So that explains the lower budget production value on here. But the riffs still sound good. I gave them a chance because I like finding these less popular bands that are great. Overall on the album, the production is pretty raw and rough, but the songs and the performances here are really cool. If you're a fan of bands like Nevermore and Symphony X, I think you'll like this. Another metal album here I've got is KK's Priest with The Sinner Rides Again. This is more just straightforward traditional heavy metal. And it's the 2nd album by this band that features former guitarist of Judas Priest, KK Downing. Their first album sounded a lot like Judas Priest, but was pretty good and had a lot of nice guitar riffs, solos, and catchy vocal hooks. And this one kind of carries that tradition forward. It still sounds a lot like Judas Priest. I think lyrically, musically, almost everything. Tim the Ripper Owens is a singer here. I like his vocal performances on these KK's Priest albums better than his vocal performances when he was actually in Judas Priest. I think his vocals sound better now than when he was in Judas Priest. But check this out if you're a fan of Judas Priest and traditional heavy metal bands like that. The next one I want to talk about is Chester Thompson and his album Wake Up Call. And this is more of a jazz fusion album. It's instrumental jazz fusion. It's got some progressive rock influences as well. And it's the 3rd album by this American drummer. He's played with so many amazing acts such as Frank Zappa, Weather Report, Santana, Genesis, and Phil Collins. He also has a jazz group called the Chester Thompson Trio. It's really great to hear him drumming so amazingly at 74 years old. He's also now a member of the great progressive rock band Unitopia, who put out a stellar album earlier this year. Now this album, Wake Up Call by Chester, is more on the jazz side. It focuses on the drums. It's all instrumental, but it features a lot of great performances by different guitarists on different tracks as well. And last album that I want to mention in my video today is by a group called Seven Sons, and the album is One of Us is the Killer, and you may recognize that album name because it's an album name that was used by the Dillinger Escape Plan. Now this is a classical string quartet, and it's actually a cover. The whole album is a cover of the Dillinger Escape Plan album of the same name. So this is classical covering Mathcore. And this is the third album by this classical string quartet that plays metal and hardcore music. So they're covering the Dillinger Escape Plan's album from 2013. Now this is not an easy listen, and it's not something I'll go back to often. Without drums and rock band instruments, the Dillinger Escape Plan's music tends to sound like the soundtrack of a horror film when done on classical string quartet instruments. It's very dissonant, very chaotic, and very unsettling. Their renditions of this rhythmically complex music is really fascinating to hear. So I recommend checking it out once if you like the Dillinger Escape Plan's album One of Us is the Killer and just want to hear what it would sound like on classical string quartet instruments. I like checking it out once. I probably won't listen to it again. It's a little bit creepy and eerie, but very fascinating that they were able to pull this off. So that's it for my first impressions of these new albums that came out over the past week. What do you think of these albums? Let me know in the comments down below. Was there anything else awesome that came out over the last week or so that you think I should check out? Definitely let me know, and hit that subscribe button if you want to stay in the loop on my videos that I put out. I try to put out an episode like this every week where I talk about new releases, and every now and then I do a different video like ranking a band's discography, or I put up the odd cover song or original song here and there. And then I do a top 10 of the month every month, which I guess I'm due to do one of those now. September's over, so I better get on that and put out my top 10 albums of September. So stay tuned for that because that's probably the next video. And until then, peace out.